And it's morning here in Florida, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Coach Talk. My name's Tim Baghurst, and today's guest is Tariqo Satterfield. Tariqo, I was a little bit taken aback because usually we have an intro video, but we've been updating our software and there was no video. So it was like, oh my gosh, we're live. But we roll with the punches. Thanks for joining us and wearing a Seminole shirt, I see. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you do and how you got there.
Absolutely. Tim, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited to be with you. But my background, I'm Tariqo Satterfield. I work as a mental performance consultant. The work that I do is faith-based driven work where we put the faith at the foundation. I believe that you have to be rooted in your faith in order for the right fruit to grow from your tree. And we do this work with college athletes, high school athletes, professional athletes as well. I've been fortunate to do this work for quite some time. How I got here was from the working in education. I worked in education for over 20 something years, actually, from elementary all the way through college, to be honest. And from doing the work in education, I always highlight the time that I was a family liaison, where I was working with the schools and the families and being the middleman and working with the families in the school district to translate what we call the alphabet soup of education, the ABCs of education, because families didn't comprehend the language. And while doing that work, I was in a meeting, sitting in a meeting that I had organized. And in that meeting, all of the representatives that worked with my student, I had to organize to be in the meeting. Why? Because they all had a responsibility to support the student, and the family was having to go to so many different meetings when we could bring everybody into one meeting and all meet together to support the student. And we called that a wraparound meeting. And in that meeting, I was at the time I was a personal trainer and began to kind of see this as an opportunity working with athletes and was like, whoa, this is very identical in athletics because the athlete goes to practice, and in the practice they have the head coach, and then they have the individual position coaches, and then they have a trainer they got to go and talk to, then they have their parents that they got to go and navigate with, and then they have anybody else who has something to do with their athletic career. And it made me think, man, we need a wraparound company. And so that started me on my journey to really build a wraparound company, a company that enhanced every component of what an athlete would need in order to be successful. So now here we are, merging faith-based principles with performance psychology, but also stepping over into not just the psychology of it, but also dealing with and working with the families themselves and what their needs are.
I want to come back to this idea of support systems because I want to share something that I've written on this topic as well that might be of interest to others. I'm going to grab a screenshot here in a minute to show everybody. But talk a little bit about what you do from a day-to-day basis. How do you work as a mental performance consultant? Because that sounds very prestigious. It sounds very vague. What exactly do you do? If I'm an athlete, high school, college, professional, whatever, and I say, Tariqo, how can you help me? What does that look like? Tell me in a more
Yeah.
detailed fashion, I guess. Give me
Yeah,
the
I
nuts
love
and
that.
bolts.
That's a great question, Tim. So we all know that the psyche deals with the mind. And psychologically, a lot of times our actions and our nervous system is programmed from the trauma and the things that we've gone through and experienced through our lives. And not just our trauma, it's also programmed from great experiences that we've had. So many times an athlete struggles with moving beyond difficulty, pressure, failure, or we hear in terms of anxiety, fear, things like that. So, what I do practically is an athlete can literally book virtual sessions because we provide telehealth sessions to athletes. They can book a virtual session, and in that virtual session, first thing we're going to do is get to know you. Let's start with the practicality of when we say that they're more than an athlete. I start by getting to know them. Like, what is your name? Who are you? Not what sport do you play, not what are your stats. Who are you? The other thing is finding commonality. There's this beautiful word that we all believe in called community. And in that word, it encompasses kind of the space that we create. I believe interest, common unity, and common interest starts and builds relationships. So we want to build a relationship with the athlete, get to know them, and then hear what the complexities are for them. If there are complexities, and sometimes it's not complexity, sometimes it's just, Tariqo, I need to know who I am outside of the sport. And so we talk then about go more along the lines of creative processing, meaning what are the creative portals that exist in your life that if you were not doing your sport, what would you be doing? So we walk them through these phases where basically it's an identity gap closer. And so many athletes struggle with their identity that we have to now extract who they are versus who they've been told they are or who they have been cultivated to be. And that comes through not just I always say it ain't just talking, it's actually more practical in what do they do on the day-to-day basis. There is a human who is becoming, and then there's a human who's being. We encourage athletes to be, right? To be present. And if they know how to be present in moments, the moments that they're present in, that's where the momentum gets built. So this is what we do, and probably we have about an hour session for athletes. We don't want to go any longer than that because it starts feeling like a lecture. But we actually open up the space so that they can talk, they can open up and have conversations and talk about where their thinking is, how their brain is wired. We do a lot on ruminating thoughts and rewiring, reframing things. But it goes down into the psychological, but we do it from a spiritual development place.
It's interesting you talk about being versus becoming, and I want to explore that a little bit more because
Mhm.
we talk about being mindful, which
Mhm.
one could argue. I know you're faith-based, and so we could argue where does that fit within faith? Maybe that's another discussion,
I
but
love it.
but how do we be present? Can you give one or two tips maybe for even coaches? Because I struggle with that sometimes where I'm thinking about what I have to do tomorrow or the
Yeah.
next thing that's coming, and I'm not really present maybe for my clients, where
Yeah.
I'm really off in la la land and I'm not really focused on Tariqo because
Mhm.
Tariqo is not as important to me right now as what might be happening in an hour or tomorrow or next month. So how do I stop that and make sure that I give Tariqo my best?
One of the strategies I use is I ask a person, Tim, to look around the room, right? Look around the room and tell me everything red that they see. And when they look around the room, they look and they see everything that's red in the room. And then the next question I ask them is, tell me something yellow that you saw. And they'll say, well, I wasn't looking for yellow. I didn't see anything yellow. I saw red things. And then I tell them, okay, now look around the room again and tell me everything yellow that you see. Now tell me something yellow that you saw. And they say, oh, I can tell you a lot of things yellow because now I was looking for yellow. That is the difference in being present. Very practically, how do you choose to be present in the moment? Is literally you have to determine what it is you want to focus on. I tell people focus is about intention. Focus is about intention. So as a coach, we have to be intentional. There's a scripture that says, in perfect scripture for what we're talking about, it says, don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow has enough to worry about for itself. Why is that scripture important? Because it tells you don't look to tomorrow. If you look to tomorrow, tomorrow is it has to plan itself. Once you get there, then you can plan with it. You can be present in it. But right now, stay focused on what is present, what is with you now. I want to pull on my great uncle is an original Tuskegee Airman. And he said this in the last lunch I had with him, Tim, which was so fascinating. We've all heard the quote, but I want to go through the story. He said to me, "Nephew, there's but one constant in life. What is this constant?" And I said, "I don't know. Change." He says, "How can change be constant if it's moving?" And then he said to me, "You're smart. You went to college. What is this constant?" And I said, "You're a lot wiser than me." I said, "You tell me." And he said, "Nephew, the only constant that you have in life is now." He said, "You know the quote, yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, and today is a gift. That's why they call it the present, nephew." He said, "There's not a present in tomorrow till you're there. You must always be willing, nephew, to focus on what you have now and open up the gift of now." And that's what I encourage coaches to do. You can look at tomorrow and recruitment and all that, but sometimes when we do that and we focus forward that way, we miss actually the gift that we have with us right now. And that gift sometimes is staring right back at us when we're looking at the paper, processing about tomorrow. That gift is holding that pen right there on that paper, but you don't believe in you. You believe that something outside of you is going to bring you better value. My uncle challenged that with me, and he said, "Your gift always lives with you and in you. Unwrap it, nephew." And that's what I encourage coaches to do. Unwrap the gift in you. Don't unwrap the record. The
Mhm.
record may tell you a lie. It may falsify your identity. The stats may falsify your identity. But that's quite interesting, right? Because before you had the record, they hired you. They saw you as a gift. So we got to get back to the roots. And when you get back to the roots, your greatness started when you were born, not even when you got hired.
Mm. By the way, if you're watching live, and I know we do have live watchers, if you have a question for Tariqo, put it in your chat box, your comment box, whatever, and we will get them to him. I want to go back to what you were talking about at the beginning, which was in order for performance to happen, and
Mhm.
we can define performance in a variety of different ways, but in order for performance to happen, everybody who is involved in that performance needs to be on the same page. And you
Mhm.
talked about your work in schools and ensuring that everybody was there. I do want to share this with everybody, that it may be worth reading. Uh, Selfishly, I was the first author of this. And if you're listening to the podcast, if you Google the Athletic Consul, CONSUL, a new role in sports organizations, and put in my name, we wrote an article with an MBA coach who, when I discussed with him the challenges of being an MBA coach, I asked him, I said, "What is one of the biggest challenges you have?" And he said, "Getting everybody in all the different units to
Mhm.
work towards the same goal, because a lot of time those units are working to save their jobs or
Mhm.
to make themselves look good to get that promotion or cover their behinds, so to speak." And he
Mhm.
said getting them all to work together is such a challenge. And so
Yeah.
we proposed the role of an athletic consul, for somebody to come in and work with all of those different silos without having an agenda, to
Mhm.
help them all work together. And it sounds like that's what you were trying to do. You don't have a "this is all about me" approach. This is a "how do we help this student? How do we help this athlete?" And I don't it's not really about me.
Right.
And I think That's needed, especially in larger sports organizations when you have multiple groups of people, whether it be athletic training, strength and conditioning, fitness, sports psych, counseling,
Yeah.
coaches, who are all trying to make this system work,
Hmm.
but don't always necessarily know what the other groups are doing.
Absolutely. I think when we recognize that and you look at it, I mean, from a real being in it every day in a school district, and your only focus, and remember I said focus is about intention. So what we started to see was that principals have a focus, teachers have a focus, parents have a focus, superintendents have a focus, and that they intentionally lock their attention in their focus. And so if everybody is locked in their focus, but this student is having to sit with each one of you, and they're getting different representatives in that focus. Watch this, Tim. Now we ask them to focus, and they're trying to navigate. Wait a minute. How am I supposed to focus? I have 7 teachers in a day that are asking me for 7 different assignments,
Mhm.
but you guys are telling me to focus? They're able to focus on the one subject that they're teaching me.
Mhm.
I've got to balance 7 teachers, 7 classrooms, 25 personalities within the classroom, not counting the teacher. But you guys are asking me to focus. So imagine that on a team, right? There's me on a team. If I'm an individual, in some teams, there are 10, 20, 30, 100 different personalities. And you guys want me to be focused and intentional. So we have to start looking at what you're saying. What brings this all together for the student, right? We say they're a student athlete, but before they were a student, they were a person. And so when we talk about that old saying, it takes a village to raise the child, this is what we're getting back to, is that sports is going to have to consider, what does it look like for an athlete to be in a village concept as an athlete? And how are we bringing the village together, like you said, and getting out of the silos of relationship with students? Because the loss of identity makes sense when you talk about it this way. If I have to go and have an identity here with this NIL company, if I have to have an identity with my coach, and if I have to have an identity with the president of the college and my professors that I have to work with as well, they're having to learn how to navigate this. And all of them are built on what? Relationship, how they relate their identity to all of these spaces. Tim, this is why mental performance is so vast and broad, but it needs to be simplified for them in a way that they can operate and go and have success and not living in overwhelm.
I think as well, we need to educate athletes on how to focus,
That's
because
right.
just telling them to focus,
Right.
it's interpreted differently for everybody. What does that
Absolutely.
actually mean? And while you were talking about that, my mind wandered to basketball as an example, just
Mhm.
because we got a little bit of March Madness going on.
That's right.
Go Razorback, I have to say. And the when that coach sits down with his players or her players,
Mhm.
and they're in that little huddle during the TV timeout, and
Mhm.
there's literally tens of thousands of people milling around making noise, how does that coach encourage those athletes to focus beyond saying, "Hey, Tariqo, focus
Mhm.
on me"?
Right.
there's there's some examples, and I think you said, you look at everything that's red. All of a sudden, I've been taken away from the drama and the excitement and the whatever that's going on.
Mhm.
Now I'm actually doing something that narrows my attention.
That's
And
right.
then when that is done, and it doesn't have to be focused on something red. If it's the Razorbacks, you're going to have a problem because the
Right,
entire
right,
crowd
right.
is going to be red. But Seminoles too, for that matter. But something that allows them to take everything away from what's going on, zoom into something small. Okay, now come back to me.
Right.
And it takes away. I really like that strategy as something you can do in the heat of the moment.
You know, something I do with students, when I go into a room, if there's a big room, any room I go to, even there on campus, when we do presentations there at Florida State, if I go into a room, one of the things I love to do is, if you hear my voice, clap one time. And literally everybody will clap. Well, a lot of people think the statement grab attention. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm grabbing the attention before I give information. And we have to have those grabbers set in place. When you grab that attention, if you hear my voice, clap one time, nobody claps. Okay? If you hear my voice, clap two times. I change it. If you hear my voice, clap three times. One, two, three. Oh, we're all together now. So now I know, as the speaker, all voices are in tune. We're aligned. If we're not aligned and we're coaching, then who are you coaching? Right? If you're in a huddle and let's say the player he just committed a foul and he's focused on the foul and you're calling the timeout because this is 3 in the first half and he's like, man, I done ruined my game, and you're actually bringing him to the side to calm him down. You know, the challenge for a coach is, I want to coach you and get you the information, but do I have your mind? And if I don't have your mind, then I call timeout for nothing. Right? Because you're going to go back on the court or go to the bench, and now you're ruminating this thought about, man, I've ruined my game now. I'm on the bench. I'm not going to get to play. But if I settle you and say, hey, everybody in the huddle, everybody with me? Come on. Come on. Let's encourage him. Good job. You're playing hard. You're playing hard. Now we're going to take a break. We're going to refocus. I need the team all on board, guys. We got to lock in and we got to do this thing together. You're having a conversation now with everybody when you bring them together. And so I think as coaches, we really got to think about, what does that look like to bring people together when pressure is present, right? What does that look like? And you said it, Tim. It looks like focus. It looks like intention, right? And being very mindful about what we're going to do. We're not just calling timeouts. All right. Because sometimes timeout might be, I love Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson used to implement this strategy with his team where he would bring them together and say, nobody talk, let's just breathe. nobody talk. Let's just breathe together for a minute. And they're like, what?
I do think that coaches often talk too much.
Right.
And part of that, interesting, this really came from Doug Lemoff, who was a guest on my show in an earlier episode. Really encourage you to listen or watch that if you get the chance.
Mm-hmm.
But he talked about how some coaches almost over coach so that those watching realize how great of a coach they are.
Yeah.
Versus the ability of some to maybe coach less and then let the players do what they've actually practiced. But then it looks like the coach really isn't coaching.
Yeah.
Oh, Tariqo didn't make many adjustments in that game. That's why they lost. As opposed to the players didn't produce what they practiced, or the players just weren't good enough against that team. And the coach really, whatever changes that would be made, the outcome would have still been the same. But if Tariqo's on the sideline doing all this and making all these changes and is energetic and doing all these things, well, Tariqo's coaching them hard. Does that equal coaching? And I love that idea of just coming in and breathing. And I remember several years ago, there was a well-known coach in the sport, one of the greatest in the sport, And I'd gotten to know this coach, and he said, "Will you sit by me while I coach this athlete?" Like, for me, that's
Mm-hmm.
a huge honor. Yes, absolutely. And the timeout happens. The coach talks to the athlete. A minute of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Athlete went back in. Coach came, sat down. He said, "I said too much, didn't I?"
Mm.
Yes, because the athlete had no chance to even express their ideas
Right.
or take a break.
Right.
All they got was, "You need to do this, you need to do this, think about this, think about that, try
Right.
this." And you get this overload of content, as opposed to, "Tariqo, how you doing?
Right. Right.
You good?
And
Try this thing.
that's
You
so
you
good.
got this. Go for
Right.
it." But do you see what I mean? And
Yeah.
I almost felt, because I've known this coach for many years, I almost felt like that coach in that moment
Mm-hmm.
was trying to perform for me.
It's so easy to do, Tim. Like, right? And I think sometimes we get so into our own heads. I don't think we recognize that for me as a coach, I have to be mindful myself. We talk about intention. I got to be intentional about listening.
Mhm.
And as a coach, it's almost like a oxymoron because you say coach and people don't think listen. People think coach means talk, direct, but coach has to be broad enough and flexible and fluid enough that you recognize I need to hear. Like my presence in this moment is to actually receive, not give. And when we have that, that allows healthy exchange, right? Because in relationship, I always tell people, um, communication uh, is not just a monologue, right? And I go so far as to say communication is not a monologue because communication takes dialogue. Distribution is a monologue. Meaning, if I'm the only one talking, then I'm distributing information. And one would say, well, I'm communicating information. Well, are you? The only way you can tell that you're having communication is that that information has to be received. And the only way you know if it was received is if the person confirms receipt. Right? Oh, I understand. I got it. Yes, coach. And then the next phase of that is wisdom, right? Application of the information. Are they applying it? And that's when I really can confirm, okay, they got it. So, like you said, we have to, as coaches, it's so critical to know the process, right, of communication. And that's something that I think is not talked about a lot either, Tim, right?
Yeah.
Coaches know how, when we say coaches know how to coach, what does that mean? Because for every coach, that is so different. I was a coach, and so I understood. My player said, "We know you as the hey baby guy or let's go baby," because that's what they would remember me saying. Hey baby, let's go. Here we go, baby. And they say, "You're the hey baby coach." So what they received from me, all the other stuff was great, but what they carried was hey baby. So you have to, as a coach, take a step back, and that's when you start to inspect the intention of your words. And when I started to inspect the intention of my words, it told me if that's all they're carrying, I better be selective about the words I'm releasing so that they're carrying the right things with them.
Yeah. One of the critiques of my own coaching is I tend to use a lot of positive words, which
Hmm.
are not a bad thing, but they have no meaning.
Right.
if you come out of a session with me and all you've heard is good, what is good? What did I
Right.
do well? And at the same instance, I almost feel obligated to say something during a 5-minute drill
Mhm.
because I feel like if I don't, maybe they don't think I'm actually watching or
Mhm.
coaching. And so I
Mhm.
feel obligated to, well done, Tariqo. So that Tariqo knows that I'm watching him and I'm doing my job.
Right.
And there's an almost implicit pressure there that if you're being, whether you're being paid or not, volunteer coach or not, but especially if you're being paid, you have an obligation to work.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
work implies that that athlete knows you are doing your job at that time.
Mhm.
And there's almost that pressure that builds. I can't stand there for
Absolutely.
3 minutes and say nothing while they do things because they'll think I'm not paying attention and not watching them and not providing feedback. And so I should
Absolutely.
say something. Good, Tariqo. Well done. Keep going, Tariqo. Motivational feedback that has very little value,
Right. Right. No,
as
I
opposed
love that.
to maybe Tariqo works for 3 minutes and then I pull Tariqo aside. Tariqo, I really like this, this, and this. Work on this, this. But for 3 minutes, I can't speak. And
Yeah.
that's hard. That's hard to do in an environment, maybe less so in high school where those
Mhm.
athletes are coming to you and they know you're coaching them and it's a long season and you're their coach. But in my
Mhm.
position where the people I coach now pay me per hour,
Right.
I want to make sure they get their value for money, their return on investment. And
Absolutely.
if I spend 60 minutes watching them perform, providing little feedback, maybe they go, well, Tim isn't really helping me that much.
Mhm.
Why do I need Tim? And
Mhm.
so there's that push, that pressure that I've got to say and do things to justify why I should have this job.
Absolutely. One of the things that growing up, I remember going to a class that kind of touches on what you're talking about, and it was a karate class. And in the karate class, karate teaches you discipline and it teaches you patience, right? So I remember being in class and us just doing one movement, and the sensei would only say, hit, hit, hit. Nobody would, and after okay, what do you do next? And before you know it, everybody in concert would get back to their start position, but he wouldn't say a word. And when you got back to start position and everybody was there, he'd say, hit, hit, hit. And I remember being like so confused, Tim, like, how's he doing this? How is he commanding the room, the environment in this space? But we saw that even in Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi. He told him one time, do this. And then he gave it to him. And you see him Danielson, or you see Danielson doing this.
Mhm.
What is he teaching me? I don't know. Just keep doing it.
Okay, but that goes back to I don't know, keep doing it. And I don't know that that works in today's
Society.
environment,
Mm,
society, where I go, no, I want to understand why you're making me do that. And I think that partly that depends on the age of the athlete
absolutely.
and the maturation. The people I work with, they would not accept that as just do it because I told you. Why? Help me understand.
Hmm.
I need to know that what you're doing makes sense. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it.
You know what we need to do, Tim, is do a better job explaining performance. Like, I don't think I always tell people when you study things, make sure you study the word itself. When you look in the word performance, what you'll see is that it's how something moves through space. Performance. So there's a space, and you've got it. There's a shaping form of moving through something. And I don't think we do a good job of explaining that performance has to, it's a travel, like it's a continuum. And so just because I'm not speaking in the moment doesn't mean you're not moving through your understanding. And that's sometimes what I have to explain to the athletes that I work with. Sometimes athletes don't understand their coach. Let's say it this way: when a coach has explained themselves over and over and over and over the same thing. And I always say to the athlete, you may be frustrated, but let's move through the frustration of it and get you to where you guys are aligned. Let's get to alignment, because right now you're just out of alignment and you're frustrated because you're not moving through it. You're parked in that. And so, even in understanding why, I do believe we have to talk about why we are performing. Why are we here? What is the purpose of being here? And there's my old mentor says this quote that I think is really good for what we're talking about. He says, where purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. When you don't know the purpose of a thing, you'll abuse a thing. So why is always necessary, and we should lay why in the beginning with intention, because that gives us a focus, right? Why are we running this play? Well, guys, this play is going to, the purpose of this play that I'm about to teach you is this. I'm going to need for you to allow us to move through this. So there'll be times where you're going to work on the play and I won't talk. But at that time, I'll be studying. I'll correct you at the end. But I want to give you the opportunity to fill it out. And so as a coach, I think that's translation, right? That we have to translate the purpose in the beginning of a thing and not expect people to figure out the invisible, because what is invisible they cannot see, but what is intentional they can.
I want to move on just because of time's sake. I have a couple more questions I want to ask you.
Absolutely.
The first one is, for those who may be looking to have a role like yours, you've built something from the ground up. You've started from zero, and now you do this as a profession. What guidelines, what suggestions, what lessons have you learned that would help somebody else who says, well, I want to be able to support coaches. I want us to be able to support athletes in this kind of way. What advice, tips, suggestions would you give?
So the first thing is what I was just talking about. Understand your why. Like, understand why you're wanting to do this work. I want to help coaches. Why? Right? Because when you hear no, your why makes no get out of the way. It moves no to the side, because it took me to hear a lot of no's, Tim. And no for me became next opportunity. So it took me to hear a lot of no's. Tariqo, you're not going to be able to do this. Tariqo, you can't do this unless. And for me, I started to show up and ask to support. And when I showed up to help, I showed up to serve first. So anybody that wants to get in this work, the first thing I encourage everybody to do is to be willing. Notice the word I said, be willing to serve. Because before I was ever paid to do what I was doing, I went and served others first. So I used to do Leadership Academy every Saturday, and I offered those services initially for free, where athletes could come out and literally I took them through life leadership lessons. That turned into me doing leadership for high school football teams, which turned into personal training and training them to lead themselves well. So that's the second thing that I say is that in order for you to lead others, become a great leader of yourself. And the way you lead yourself well is by being intentional. This does not mean being perfect. It's allowing yourself to be perfected. So get you a mentor. I think you have amazing programs that like that Tim has here and the programs that are available to you guys. Make sure that you tap into those programs and the opportunities that you have to advance and grow you. And when you grow you, people will know you. I'm going to say that again. When you grow you and advance you, and the deposits that you make are in you serving others, then people will see value because you've done the work. I always tell people you can go get a degree and never see your value. There are lots of people that have degrees but don't know their value. There are lots of people who are in schools and in jobs and they don't see their value. So it is very possible for you to be employed and not know how to deploy. I'm going to say that again. It is very possible for you to be employed and not know how to deploy. So I always encourage people to learn to deploy your skill sets, deploy your gifts. What does that mean, Tariqo? To be able to take what I am gifted to do, the thing that I'm willing to do for free, and to deploy it as a skill that someone can benefit from, to use it, right? My gifting is talking. I had to learn how to package it. And here's why I say that. I want to finish this part with this. The scripture says, be fruitful. Be fruitful. That says to me that if you're requiring me to be something, I must possess something that I need to look into. I had to look at Tariqo and say, Tariqo, what do you have in your hand? My voice. Be fruitful with it. Tariqo, you talk a lot. That's my fruitfulness. Now, not everybody receives it as fruitfulness. I'm not looking for everybody. I'm looking for whoever is hungry for fruit from my tree. So recognize that you're an individual and you've been assigned to someone somewhere. But if you go nowhere, that someone that is somewhere will never be able to find you. So serve, serve, serve. That's what I say to anybody that's trying to deploy your gift. Find somewhere to serve your gifts to others.
And I'm going to add to that and say it doesn't always or shouldn't always be free.
Nope. And it won't. It will not. I can tell you from personal experience. There was a season, and I love that now I'm at a place where I get to determine where I offer my service for free, right? I get to determine that. But when I first started, the Bible says you reap what you sow. And so I knew I hadn't sowed anything. So I had to get in the gardening. And in order for me to get in gardening, I had to plant some seeds. If I wanted to bear some fruit in my own life, I have to sow some seeds. So I went around sowing seeds for many years, Tim. When nobody was paying me, I was traveling and driving up the road. And maybe that's some of you. You've been coaching, you've been driving up the road, you've been working with people. But I want you to know that when you sow those seeds, harvest has to come. Know the season that you're in and when you need to sow, when you need to nurture and water, and when you need to receive your harvest. It is so critical for you to know your season and do not compare your season to somebody else. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're going to take a very short break and then we're going to come back and just talk to Tariqo for just a little more. We'll be right back.
Imagine turning passion into powerful leadership on and off the field. At FSU, you can earn a 100% online master's or graduate certificate in athletic coaching. Designed by coaches, for coaches, no matter your experience or sport. FSU Center for Athletic Coaching, educating today's coaches to lead tomorrow's athletes.
And we're back in. Tariqo, final question for you. You mentioned at the beginning that your work is faith-based, and I think it's important to clarify what that means.
Mm-hmm.
The assumption is that for many of us, we just when we coach, when we perform as athletes, we just perform. We use our physical talents, we use our mental fortitude to find success. And I know you agree with this. I think that there's more to it than how you achieve success beyond just I use what I have and I train hard and I work hard and look what happens. There has to be a foundation for how you approach your sport, how you interact with your teammates, how you interact with other coaches, how you do or don't show respect to officials, etc. And I would argue that all of us have some kind of philosophy, even if you don't believe in some kind of faith-based religion. You all have a philosophy that guides your decision making, guides your motivations, etc. So if you would just share a little bit about where you come from in working with people and why.
Yeah, so everything to me starts very simply with a spiritual development. Why spiritual development, Tim? Because we know that we're made up, all of us, where we have a commonality is we're triune beings made up of spirit, soul, and a body. I always say to people who say, well, I don't know that I call it a spirit. Okay, well, you let your oxygen leave your body and then tell me what happened to those muscles and tell me what happened to that mind, right? And so what I say to people, if your breath leaves your body, something left you, right? We know that this body that we have, this body is not just injured physically when we have an injury. It's also injured in our mind. It's also injured in our breathing. Our breathing changes when we go through injury. And if that breathing changes when you go through injury, that means that every part of your being was affected. So what we do is we say, how often are you working and developing yourself spiritually? We're not talking religion. We're talking the spiritual part of who you are. How often do you go to the weight room for it? Or let's go to the mind. How often do you go to therapy for it? Or I challenge people to ask, what store can you go buy kindness in? Where's the place that I can go and purchase patience? Because if there's a store, I'm sure many of us would go and purchase it. But I do believe that the principles that are in the Bible, which is my faith, the Word of God, it literally gives you a mindset and instruction on how to implement spiritual practices and how to develop that. And if you water this, if you develop it, no different than going to the weight room, Tim, you get stronger the more consistent you develop it. Yes, you will get more kind. You will get more patient. And more does not equal doing it less. More equals increasing the consistency of growth in the area. So we want to make sure that athletes have the opportunity to not just talk about their mental health, but also talk about spiritual health, physical health, financial health. How do we say they're being elite if we're eliminating a portion of who they are? We don't do that at exposure. At exposure, we holistically, and when I say holistically, holistically serve them in who they completely are.
Tariqo, thanks for sharing. Thanks for providing your insight. If somebody wants to connect with you, whether just more questions or maybe even look at working with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. You can reach me at info@exposureacademy.com. Our website is www.exposureventures.com. And then I'm on Instagram under the Tariqo Satterfield. And you can find me on LinkedIn as Tariqo Satterfield.
And just for those of you who are listening to the podcast, exposure is spelled Xposure, not your normal. Tariqo had to
Drop
be cute.
the E. Drop
He
the
had to
E.
be cute. Well, that's a wrap for us, everybody. My thanks to Tariqo Satterfield for joining me
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And of course, just a reminder that we try to do these every few weeks. So be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching or listening. But until next time, thanks so much for watching.